Thanks a lot for being here this afternoon. It's fantastic to be here and to be talking to you about the exciting opportunities in gaming and what more we can do on Play and Android together to make you even more successful. One of our biggest goals is to make sure that we work with all of you, our developers, our partners, to help create and distribute high-quality games, games that delight users, entertain users, engage users, and in the process help you build a successful, financially scalable business on Google Play, right? That's our number one objective here. And what we're going to do today is essentially talk about some of the new interesting ways in which you can think about unlocking the value that the platform today offers you, okay? As you all know, we're seeing incredible momentum in Google Play, right, on Android. And clearly, there are more and more opportunities which are opening up as smartphone penetration in this country increases. And not just in this country, as you think about building for users in other markets, clearly Android is at the forefront of driving smartphone adoption in a number of markets. And therefore, the opportunities on Play and Android become even more interesting for you as you think about becoming and building a bigger business globally. Just a show of hands, how many people here are developing for the Indian market? All right, good. I'm assuming all the others are building for overseas, right? How many people are targeting users in the US? Okay, Europe? Southeast Asia? Okay, cool. So good, so I think we've got a bunch of priorities, different people, different objectives, and there are certain things that I want to talk to you about today that can help you become even more successful, as I said, on Google Play. So what I'm going to do is talk about, of course, tell you a little bit about what's happening from a macro perspective on Android and Play, what are some of the big trends that we are seeing, and then go deeper into some of the more recent product initiatives that we've rolled out to help you create and distribute better games. So let me start. I think one big milestone that we reached very, very recently is crossing the 1.4 billion active device mark globally, right? So through Android today, you can now reach 1.4 billion active smartphone users globally. And it's not just the users, right? There's a thriving ecosystem of partners that we're trying to build to make sure that this becomes a scalable model for you. So for example, we're working with about 400 OEMs, right, who've rolled out 4,000 distinct devices, which are being sold through over 500 operator partnerships. So clearly, if you look at the overall ecosystem, handset manufacturers, along with operators, and you've got the right mix, the right recipe for success, and a truly scalable global platform. What does this translate to? So there are about 190 countries globally that you can now distribute your games in. Over 130 countries globally where you can actually sell your in-app items. So clearly, I think if you have aspirations to build a business, a gaming business which is truly global, there is no better platform for you right now than Android. It's paying off, right? So clearly, I think in terms of the commercial opportunity for developers, we paid out $7 billion. $7 billion to developers in 2014. And that number is essentially on a meteoric rise. That number tends to increase by leaps and bounds every year, right? So clearly, I think developers are finding the platform extremely lucrative from a commercial standpoint. And therefore, this is something that you should think about as you think about building a bigger business. But we're not stopping there. I think our endeavor is to make sure that we are innovating and launching new products, new ways to acquire users, to meaningfully engage users so that you continue to innovate and continue to grow with the platform. So what I'm going to do is take a few minutes to talk about some recent initiatives that we've launched in India that can help you become more successful, especially if you look at emerging markets and India in specific. One of the big asks that we had from a number of you for a long time was the ability to price your products to match Indian user tastes, right? Which is essentially the ability to actually price products at sub $1 prices. In August, we announced that, right? Now in India, you can price your digital in-app items as low as 10 rupees. And that's driving a lot of value for developers, helping them acquire new paying users, and essentially giving users incentive to actually try out these products, because clearly I think a 50 or 60 rupee mark was still hard was still not really acceptable to a lot of users out there. And with the lowering of these price points, I think the entire opportunity to drive trials and get new users is something which is opened up. How many people in this room are aware of this? Yeah, about 40%, right? So this is something which is live, right? You can go down to 10 rupees. We will be launching in other markets as well soon. India is the first market globally where we've done this. And hopefully this will give you a very, very interesting opportunity to acquire new paying users in the country. The other big trend, clearly I think as consumers who live and operate in this country, we know that retail is a big, big environment. Retail is an extremely important channel for users to acquire physical products, and that could apply very easily to digital products as well, right? So how many people here are aware of Google Play gift cards? You know they exist. We launched them in India last month, right? The physical cards are now available in India across 22 cities, 500 stores, with 4 offline retail partners. So Vijay Sales, Planet M, Spice Hotspot, and yes, that's one. And there are two online retailers that we've partnered with as well. So Snapdeal and Amazon are now distributing gift cards, and there is an opportunity to actually use it for users to pay cash on delivery as well, right? So clearly, I think cash is a big phenomenon in India even today, and we want to make sure that you as developers get the opportunity to leverage that behavior and try and monetize more successfully using newer forms of payment. How many people here are aware of Google Play for Families? Wow, just 4, 5, okay, cool. I think one of the big asks from a lot of users globally, not just in India, is the ability to find content in a safe, find good quality content in a safe, trusted environment for kids, right? So if you are a developer that's building out content, apps, games for children or for families, not just for children, but for content which you think is going to be universally applicable and appealing to families, we now have a new discovery experience in Google Play, right, which is the Families tab. And it's not just a tab. You can actually go ahead and sub-segment by age category. So for example, I can find content for kids age 3 to 6, 8 to 12, et cetera, et cetera. And I know that once I am part of the family or a particular content piece is part of the family section on Play, it's safe, it's trusted, and it is high quality. So if in case you are building out games, apps, content for kids, I think you should opt in to the families option on the Google Play developer console so that your app, your game starts appearing in family search results and on the family tab as well. Okay? Any questions so far? Yes?
I have 2 questions. One, you're talking about the 10 rupees price point. What sort of traction have you seen post-launch of that feature? The second question is, you were talking about 7 billion in revenue.
Yeah.
So is there any insight you can give us as to how much of the revenue comes from India, as well as how much of the revenue, how is the revenue distributed across the top 10 grossing, the top 100 grossing, and so on?
Yeah, okay. Right, so let's talk about the price point first. The new price points have now been adopted by hundreds of developers, and not just Indian developers, but also global developers that want to grow in India, right? So I think in terms of adoption, it's something which is still low, but it is growing very, very fast. If you look at the overall developer pool in the country. People who have adopted, and I'm going to talk about a couple of case studies later on, but people essentially have seen a massive spike in order volumes, right? Now, obviously, because the average order value falls, because it's a lower price point, the order volumes have to go up significantly higher in order for your revenue to lift up, right? So a lot of developers are seeing that. So you could be seeing, and there are developers who are seeing like a 700, 800% increase in orders, and combine that with an average drop in price or a transaction value, that could easily translate into like a 50, 60, 70% increase in overall revenue for you. And that's what a lot of developers are seeing. So I'm not saying it's definitely going to work for you, but it is something that is being increasingly successful for a lot of developers. Okay? It's also a question of the genre and the kind of title it is, right? A lot of developers, rather than just dropping prices of existing SKUs, they are looking at launching new in-app products within the same game, right? Rather than just dropping prices of existing SKUs. So it's a function of game design, your gameplay, the genre that you're operating in as well that needs to be looked at. I'll talk about a couple of case studies later on, right? As far as the monetization is concerned, $7 billion is a global number. We don't break it out by market currently. But I think given the low base in India, I think that number, the growth is absolutely fantastic, right? So I think India is one of the highest growth markets for play, and that gets reflected in the way or in the number or in the amount of revenue that developers in this country are making. Of course, there's a lot of room to grow. It's still a small number relative to the rest of the world. Okay. Cool. Let's move on. The other big news this year, Android M, Marshmallow, right? One big, while there are lots of interesting features, lots of interesting updates there, the one thing that I want to call out here, which I think is something which is going to be increasingly relevant for a lot of you in this room, is the new runtime permissions model, right? One of the big pain points that we had in the entire user flow from install from discovery to install was this whole notion of a user having to opt into all those permissions, right? You find an app which you think is interesting, you try and install it, there's this massive dialog box which opens up, hey, if you want to install it, there are these 10 permissions that the app is going to ask for, are you okay with it? And if the user says yes, they can go ahead and download, or they can just cancel the download at that point in time. We are changing that now, right? As part of the Android M rollout, we're changing it. Essentially now, permissions will be at runtime, which means that at the point of installing the app, there will be no dialog box. It's only once the user opens the app, and if a particular permission is required, the user is going to be asked for it. Now, the whole objective of doing this, like I said, is to reduce the friction that lies in the entire discovery to acquisition process for users. And hopefully, this will help you as well as more and more devices in the country become M-compatible. Right? So to make this come alive, this is what it looked like before Marshmallow. So you see that dialog box which is highlighted, all those permissions being asked, and then you accept, and then you install, right? That's something which is changing. This is what it'll look like now. You find the app, you install it, and the resolution is not very clear, I think. I don't know, do you want to change some settings, maybe? Can you guys see this clearly, the display? Yeah. The resolution needs to be a little sharper. So by the way, that's how it works. You install the app, and once you open the app for the first time, depending upon the use case, that's when the app actually asks for permission, right? So that's one big change that we are making on the product front, which you'll see increasingly over the next few months. Right, so new price points, new pricing model, launch of gift cards, new products, new initiatives. How do you sort of make use of all this? How do you make sense of all of this and start teasing out and start figuring out the features that you think are going to be relevant as you plan to scale up? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about three things which I think are important, which all of you, I'm sure, care about, which is about how do you think about building for success? How do you build high-quality games that are going to be successful? How do you think strategically about user acquisition and engagement, because that's a very, very critical piece of the entire business cycle? And then how do you think about monetizing at scale, right? Those are the three buckets that I'm going to now talk to you about for the next 15 minutes or so. First things first, some of you may have seen this stat earlier, but this is something that I love reiterating as often as I can because I think it's so, so powerful, right? Clearly, I think the reason quality becomes extremely important and the reason quality needs to be the number one goal that all of you in this room should have is because not just because it's good for users and because it is the right thing to do, but also because it has a very direct, demonstrable impact on business performance, right? When you look at the entire suite of apps on the Google Play ecosystem and you segment them into different categories based on their ratings, with the assumption that ratings are a very powerful signal of quality, or at least perceived quality, you find what all of us have always believed to be true, which is that the higher rated apps end up making a lot more money on Google Play compared to those that are rated lower, right? So that's exactly what you see here. If you have a rating of 4 to 5, typically those apps end up making 4x the amount of money that apps in the 3 to 4 bucket make, right? So data sort of confirms what we believe to be true, and therefore quality needs to be a very, very important goal for you as you think about becoming more successful on play. That has to be at the heart of everything that you do. So what is quality, right? There are four things. There are four broad areas that we look at when we think about quality. Does your game have useful features that users are going to love to engage with, right? From an aesthetic perspective, is the design, the user flow, etc., something that will resonate with users? How about technical performance? Will the game work across devices, across different network conditions? Will it have a useful offline state, especially relevant in a market like India, right? And does it involve or does it include the latest Android innovations? For example, does the game use player analytics for you to drive better outcomes for yourself? Or do you use play game services, for example, right? So those are four broad areas that typically go into the quality discussion, and I'm going to take some time to talk a little bit more about these as we go ahead. Now, why does this become important? If you look at, we've done a lot of research around the impact of quality on user behavior. What we find is something very, very interesting. More than 80% of users, right, more than 80% will not open an app again after 2 early stage crashes. So the window of opportunity that you have to connect meaningfully with users is relatively short. Right? There are millions of apps on play. The window of opportunity to connect with users is limited. Therefore, how do you make a good job? How do you do a good job of really finding the right quality levers to work on? The good news is a lot of the quality issues are addressable, right? So we looked at a sample of 1-star reviews, right? We looked at a sample of apps that got 1-star reviews on Play, and we tried to figure out what were the reasons for those poor ratings or 1-star reviews. We found that 56% of them are related to quality issues that can be addressed proactively to a certain extent. And that's what I'm going to talk about now, right? So quality becomes paramount. We've seen how that impacts revenue and sales for you as a business. These are some of the quality-related aspects that typically frustrate users, and what can you do about it? How many people here use alpha beta testing on Google Play? Wow, just 4 or 5? That's disappointing, guys. Right? These are very, very powerful tools. And more importantly, these are free tools, right? So these are free tools, extremely powerful, which are available for you to make sure that you have the right focus on quality during your game launch process. Please use them, right? It's our endeavor to make sure that you guys have all the tools, you have all the insights to make those decisions about quality. Please use them, right? I'm going to talk about that a little bit. How many people here are aware of staged rollouts or heard of staged rollouts? Okay. So clearly, I think adoption generally is low, at least in this room. I would love to sort of talk to you a little bit about what you can do, why we believe this is important, and what kind of impact it can have on your game performance. So testing, the whole notion of testing is extremely important as you think about building a good quality game, right? And there are 2 things here, alpha beta testing and staged rollouts. What alpha and beta testing allow you to do is essentially run or distribute your game to an early group of testers who can then provide you feedback on what's working well. What does this do for you? It helps you preempt some of the issues around crashes, bugs, user flow issues, etc. early on before a full-scale rollout. And therefore, what you're doing is you're in a way minimizing your risk of failure, right? Now, again, what you can do, while alpha and beta testing have been available for a while now, there are 2 important things that have happened over the last few months that I want to call out. One, for alpha beta testing earlier, you had to rely on Google Groups or to get feedback through Google Groups to get feedback, right? We've done away with that limitation. So you can now have a beta test which is as open as you want, which means that you could just share a link very broadly with a very large user base, and you could get them to opt into your beta program, or you could keep it really targeted and focused as well. So, for example, if you already know these 100 testers that you've already identified, and you just want to add those email addresses to a beta test, go ahead and do that. So there are enough opportunities and enough flexibility now in the system to make your testing as impactful as you want it to be. The other thing to note about beta testing is that users during this phase cannot give you public ratings or reviews, right? So that sort of takes care of any risk that you have, right? So you can test in a relatively risk-free environment, don't have to worry about ratings or reviews, and get real feedback, which you can then use to improve the quality, okay? What staged rollouts allow you to do is something very interesting. If you have a major update which is going live, you can then control progressively the distribution of that update to an increasingly larger share of your user base. So for example, if I have a user base of 100, I can control maybe the first 5% get it on day one, and then increase that in subsequent increments of 5, 10, 15% to reach the entire user base. Again, the whole objective being to catch early bugs, crashes, etc. before a full-scale rollout, right? So these are some tools which are available, which can go a long way in helping you drive up quality of your games. So please go ahead and use them. How many people here test on real, you had a question, can you do that after the session? Thanks. How many people here believe that testing on real devices is important? Okay, good. How many of you actually test on real devices? Good, about 50% of the room, 50, 60% of the room, good. So in order to make this easier going forward, what we are very excited to announce to you is the launch of something known as the Cloud Test Lab, right? The Cloud Test Lab is a new Google product which will allow you to run testing on a farm of real physical devices that we will do automatically for you, right? So when you upload your game, your APK, onto the alpha or beta channel, the Cloud Test Lab will essentially run a series of automated tests across, say, the top 20 Android devices. Because physically, it's very hard for you to test on each and every device, right? So we pick up the top 20 Android devices, and we run the tests on all of those, and you get a nice sort of feedback report on how many successful launches you had, how many failed launches, what were the screenshots like, et cetera, through the console itself. This is a tool currently in beta. It's being rolled out over the next couple of months. If you haven't applied for it, you should go ahead and apply for it through the console again, right? It's called the Cloud Test Lab. It'll make your testing a lot more impactful, a lot easier, a lot more scalable. Okay? You had a question. We can take that now. Yeah. Yeah.
Alpha, beta, sorry. So you mentioned you have alpha and beta. I was curious, even you don't get customer ratings for right reasons. You don't want to impact your app rating, right?
Correct.
As a developer, how would I get feedback from customers? Are there other channels through which customers who participate in the beta give you feedback? That was the kind of the question. And the second is, do you plan to allow kind of more granular targeting? So for example, if I want to do a beta in a particular geography or particular demographics, do you have any kind of plans or thoughts around how I could target better?
Yeah, good questions. So as far as feedback is concerned, you can get feedback through email. If you have email addresses that you are automatically added to the beta form, or you could get feedback through Google Groups, the traditional way, if you wanted to. So it's really up to you how you want to get that feedback. Like I said, it's again a question of how big you want the beta testing to be. Do you want it to be like an open test that anybody can join, or do you want it to restrict it to a number of 100, 200, 500 users? And you can then figure out how best they can. It could be through a community, it could be through an online board, it could be through a Facebook page, whatever it is, right? It's up to you how you want to gather feedback. Okay. As far as targeting for beta testing, I think it's a very good question. It's a great ask. We'll definitely feed that back to the product team. There is a lot of work which is going on to make it even more granular, so stay tuned. We'll let you know when that happens. Okay. Can I request that we do questions at the end so that we can quickly go through the session, and then, yeah, we'll take the last 10 minutes for questions. Right, quickly talking about user acquisition, I'm pretty sure a lot of you here sort of struggle with discovery, user acquisition, and a bunch of techniques that you may have tried out to make this better. There are three things that I want to call out. One is, from a product perspective, we are making some changes to improve the discovery experience on Google Play, right? The first one is something known as guided search. So for broad sets of terms, for example, searching for shopping, right? Where I'm not calling out a particular title, I'm just searching for using the word shopping. What we will now enable is for the system to throw up a bunch of apps in different categories, because at that point in time, it's not clear whether the user is looking for a shopping app, could be looking for coupons, could be looking for something else. It's not very clear. So at that point in time, what we want to do is showcase to the user that there are different categories of apps available which may suit their requirement. And that's called guided search. Right? So that's something that we're going to be rolling out increasingly across a number of broad categories, broad terms. The other thing that I want to talk about is developer homepages. How many people here have a developer homepage on Play? Okay, good. About half, about 40%. So this is extremely relevant if you have more than one title. Right? A developer homepage is your own branded destination on Google Play. You can create it through the console again, and it's a nice link which you can then share with users. All the apps and all the games that you have can all be housed on that particular page, so it becomes your permanent sort of destination on Play. The other thing that we're trying to do is to boost content discovery in India is more thematic collections on Play, right? So you may have seen the Independence Day collection in India. You may have seen, this is an example of the sub-dollar or the new lower priced apps collection. Similarly for new lower priced games. So essentially we're looking at more and more opportunities to showcase locally relevant content because clearly that's something that users are going to find useful, giving you an opportunity to connect with more users and hopefully drive the entire ecosystem forward, right? So we are increasingly rolling out these collections in the country. Now, whether you rely on organic traffic or on paid user acquisition campaigns to drive traffic, I think there are some things that you need to think about doing which are extremely important once a user actually lands on your Play Store listing, right? For most users, the Play Store listing is the first touch point that they have with your game, and therefore it's extremely important to get this right. You'll be surprised as to how many users, even today, make a judgment call on the quality of the app based on what they see on the listing, right? And that's when, and make a go, no-go decision whether to actually install it or reject it. So please spend time thinking about the quality of your store listing. Make sure you have a catchy image, a header image. Make sure your icons are sharp and are very, very clearly differentiated. Make sure you have high-quality screenshots, videos in the store description. So all these sound very basic, but you'll be surprised as to how many people are still not doing it and the kind of impact they can actually have on converting people who've landed up on your store listing to actual installers, right? How many people here have wondered about, okay, what's going to happen to my install rate if I use a blue icon instead of a red icon? Have you thought about that? Yeah? You do, right? How would installs be impacted if I were to change the description from X to Y? Right? These are very real questions that we all have. And so far, we've sort of relied on a combination of maybe some data signals, but largely our intuition to make those calls. We are now making it easier for you to do these experiments, right? What we've launched is something known as A/B tests on Google Play, A/B testing on Google Play, store listing experiments, right? So what you can now do is run different variations of your Play Store listing, right? So if I want to figure out, I'm not clear out of these 5 icons or 3 icons, which is going to deliver better results, I can do an experiment through my console and figure out which has a higher impact on installs, right? So that's something which is now available. If you haven't tested it out, go ahead and use it. It's part of the console. So like I said, store listing experiments allow you to test different parts of your store listing page. Start maybe by experimenting with your icon. That's an easy one to do. And then think about different assets, right? Text, videos, etc. Let me show you a couple of examples. So this is Congregate. What they did was, for Global Assassin, which is one of their games, they tested out four different icons, right? And they found through the A/B testing process that the helicopter icon there actually drove a 91% increase in installs, everything else being constant. Imagine, and they saw their CPIs almost halving as a result, right? So you can now, you don't have to rely on your intuition for this kind of stuff anymore. You can use these experiments and figure out what converts better for you. Another interesting story, right? So this is Rovio's Angry Bird Transformers. Very, very interesting story. What they did here was, so if you see what you see in the first row, they tested out different designs, and they found that the third one, the top right one, resulted in a 7.2% increase in installs for them. They decided to take that design, and then they ran another test with 3 different variants of that selected design with a different tilt, right? And then they found, in this case, the first one worked better for them, right? Which is the first one in the middle row. And finally, once they decided that that was the design that they wanted to go with, they wanted to test out different background colors. And then they found that the control group, which is this one, actually delivered better results. So it was a very, very structured way of figuring out what is really working for you in terms of getting more users. Right? And this is something that all of you can do with your titles. Useful, hopefully? Will you try it out? Yes? Okay, cool. It says time is up, but I'm going to take 10 more minutes. I'll try. Okay. So for testing as a best practice, start with a couple of hypotheses that you think to be true, and maybe start simple, right? Start with maybe simple assets like your icons, and figure out from there how you want to sort of scale it to other assets of the Play Store listing. For those of you who rely on paid campaigns to acquire users, there's good news. We've launched something known as universal app campaigns on Google Play through the developer console, right? So a lot of developers have asked us, look, we want to use paid UA, but we don't have like large AdWords teams to manage campaigns for us. What do we do? This is exactly what the answer to that, right? So through the developer console, you don't even have to actually go into AdWords. Through the developer console, now all you need to do is specify your overall budget, specify the target CPI that you have in mind, and Google does the job for you, right? So essentially across YouTube, search, apps, Play Store itself, as well as web, we essentially run those campaigns automatically. You just need to specify the budget and the CPI, like I said, and take the complexity out of running complex UA campaigns, right? So you can do that through the console now. Right, so we've spoken about user acquisition. I'm going to spend some time on retention. I think clearly everybody here believes that retention is really the most important sustainable way of driving success for your titles. And data always points to that. So if you see the top apps, clearly you will see retention rates day 7, day 10, day 30 to be a lot higher than the ones that don't. And as developers, it's very, very important for you to take the right product calls to drive up engagement for long-term success. So there are a bunch of tools which are available within the Google ecosystem to help you drive engagement, right? How many people here have heard of Google Play Game Services? Do you guys use it? You do? Okay, good. So there are some very interesting things that you can do to drive up engagement using this. So achievements, leaderboards, saved game states, player analytics, multiplayer, gifts, quests, all of that is available through the Play Game Services API, right? So that's something that we strongly recommend that you use in order to drive up engagement with users. These are some examples, and which I'm going to skip now because we don't have a lot of time. I'm going to talk about monetization now as the last topic before I wrap up. How many people here rely on in-app purchases as the dominant, okay, what, 40%, 30, 40%, ads? Others? Not making money? Okay, let's not get there, okay. Okay, cool. So there are lots of models out there, right? There's in-app purchases, there's ads, subscriptions, especially if you have apps, and then of course you have paid games and paid apps. And the model that you choose really is a function of your business objective and the market that you're operating in. For example, in a lot of emerging markets, right, like India, Southeast Asia, where historically we did not have a lot of forms of payment, a lot of developers relied on advertising, right? But that's now changing. And therefore, that's opening up new opportunities for you. So I think for the ones that do rely on in-app purchases or are thinking of launching in-app purchases, I've already covered some of the highlights that you need to be aware of. Launching of the new pricing thresholds. So making sure that you are able to use the new 10 rupee pricing to scale revenue. And even things like gift cards that we launched. So globally, if you see, we are doubling down a lot on rolling out new forms of payment. 61 new forms of payment were launched in 32 countries in the last 1 year. Now we have essentially gift cards in about 29 countries. PayPal, not relevant for India, but we do have that in about 25 countries. And carrier billing is already available in 30 plus countries globally, right? And we are constantly working very, very hard to increase that overall number and give you more opportunities to monetize. So that's something that clearly can help you in going global with your titles. Like I said, the lower price thresholds, I think, find opportunities to get users. Somebody asked about case studies. This is a very interesting one. This is the Nova launcher, the very popular launcher in India, as you know. When they dropped their price from 150 rupees to 15 rupees for a period of 1 week, right? Those are the kind of spikes they saw in orders, right? So while, of course, like I said, this story may not play out identically for all of you, but I think the point to note is that there are opportunities like this, right? Whether it's through existing in-app products or new SKUs, you can drive trials, you can drive new users onto your titles by leveraging the new pricing thresholds. How many here use Google Analytics? Okay. So Google Analytics can give you some very interesting insights about monetization, right? Depending upon the various events that are tagged in your GA account, you can identify different stages at which you may want to do something differently to drive up monetization. So for example, in this case, there are these 9 events which are tagged in GA. One of the events that you see which makes the least amount of money is somebody who's lost more than 10 times. And if you look at those group of users who've lost more than 10 times in the game, there's practically no revenue coming in from them because they're probably disappointed, they leave the game and they don't come back. Now that's an interesting insight for you to think about, okay, so maybe after somebody who's lost 6 or 7 or 8 lives, you may want to give out some sort of an offer to keep them coming back and to drive stickiness at that stage, because you know these users tend to drop off completely after losing 2 more lives, right? So Google Analytics can give you a lot of these interesting trends and insights that you can then use creatively to design your marketing, your in-game marketing, your game design, and drive better outcomes for your game. Okay. The other thing, right? Can I optimize some of these assets within the game? We spoke about Play Store listing through A/B experiments. That was different. This is something else, right? You can do A/B testing on your certain aspects of the game itself through the Google Tag Manager. So for example, there are these 2 different assets, right? There's same story, but there's a buy now and there's a checkout now, right? The call to action is slightly different. And you want to figure out which particular call to action works better for you. In terms of driving more conversions and better monetization. So you can run A/B tests through using the Google Tag Manager and figure out what is driving better results. So clearly optimizing for better monetization is also a very, very important thing as part of the overall game design process. The player stats API. So I think player stats APIs is a very, very interesting set of use cases that you can have to drive outcomes. So for example, you identified a set of players who are your top 95% or your top 5% of paying users, right? Somebody like that who has left and been gone for like 10 days comes back to the game. At that time, you can call the API to figure out whether this is that person, and then you can display a special offer, gift, power up, whatever it is, to get that person back on and deeply engaged and monetized. Right? So the player stats API is a very, very interesting example of how you could drive some engagement and monetization. Another one, right? There are some users, a lot of people here monetize through ads as well as in-app purchases. But you may want to have like a differentiated approach for different kinds of users. Maybe you don't want to monetize your power users through ads. Maybe you want to monetize them through in-app purchases, and maybe sort of your occasional users you could think of showcasing ads to. So maybe that's an interesting use case for you for the Player Stats API. You figure out those users who are power users, push in-app to them, and look at advertising as a model for others who may be better monetized through that channel. So again, look, there are tools available, there are insights available. It's really a function of your business objectives and how you link those insights to what you want to do to monetize better within the game. Yeah? We always talk about localization. Data supports that. Typically, we found globally that localizing listings ends up driving revenue more than 6x, right? So if you are targeting other markets outside India, please make sure that you are localizing your listings to drive better results for the title, okay? Okay, time is up. So these are the 3 things we spoke about: building for success, looking at all the tools, insights available through alpha beta testing and staged rollouts, and of course now the Cloud Test Lab to improve quality, looking at the quality of your Play Store listing, looking at universal campaigns to drive user acquisition, and of course monetizing through the new pricing thresholds, looking at insights through Play Game Services as well as Google Analytics, and hopefully driving better performance of your game, right? I know, I'll get off. That's it, thank you for your attention. If there are any questions, what we can do is after this, I'm around for those questions which are still unanswered, and happy to take those. I hope you found this session useful, and hopefully we'll go back and implement some of this stuff.